Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Old School Shooters podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and we are joined, as usual, by the King of Connecticut, looking sartorial in his splendor this morning. What's with that jacket?
It's actually this jacket. I've told the story on here before. My aunt lives. She spends part of the year in Shaka, in Sicily, where my mom's parents are from, my grandparents are from, and I purchased a little villa over there because it's so cheap and it's amazing what you get for a small square footage. It's like the price of a car here in the States, and I bought this jacket over there. I love it there. It's subtropical, way down by Tunisia. Amazing. I mentioned on the last episode that I went fishing in the inlet this morning and how you kind of chase the redfish as they jump, and that's how they fish, and that's how they fish there in Shaka. It's a fishing village down about 50 miles south of Palermo. It's beautiful, and they're known for their style over there and their lifestyle, which is like the epitome of Dolce Vita, man. So laid back. And of course, my other heritage is Irish, like our guest, the great Curran JACOBS, the great Irishman world champion. And want to bring Curran in, but I want to talk about something first before we bring in our guest. I discovered something yesterday, and I saw it innocently enough, just it flashing on like a Google News thing, about a gentleman named Alex Murdoch, who is a prominent attorney in Charleston. And we used to have boats at the same marina on Johns Island, right outside of Charleston. And I knew him. I wouldn't call him, go as far as to say a friend, but he was an acquaintance. He was just a pretty just regular, like, bland dude from what I saw of him. He had a really nice boat. That marina had a really nice pool where he'd come in off the boat. And the only thing I remember from him, Jack, and this is the dude, by the way, that's accused of murdering his wife and son. And for some reason, the media and entertainment have attach themselves to this case, which is wild because there's so many, murder cases just in South Carolina alone. But this become a major case for the media, that it's on every news station. There's 2 Netflix documentaries about it. And the only thing I remember really about talking to him, they'd have like some cocktail parties out there and people be hanging out, but mostly just him coming off his boat, like hanging out at the pool at our marina, and he'd always wear like one of those long sleeve shirts, like the Realtree, fishing shirts in the pool. And I remember him always, like, he joked with me. This was my only memory. He always joked, and he's like, man, he goes, I wish I had the skin like that guy. He goes, look at that guy. He's out here for like 5 minutes, and he's like bronze, like a statue. And it was kind of weird, Jack.
Well, your reputation as a legendary ladies' man is well documented. But do you think, King, that he may have been, I don't know, a little sweet on you?
Well, Jack, that's a good point. I never thought of it that way. And it could be, to each his own, man. And maybe that's what caused the whole friction. Who knows? But it's wild, man. It's a wild case. I don't want to spend too much time on that. And I didn't know it until yesterday. Innocently enough, I just posted about him. And then I'm getting all these people, some friends back home, and they're like, Matt, what the hell? Where have you been? How do you not know about this? And all these people that are all like, I don't want to speculate on his guilt or innocence. I don't know about it. But, when people like glam on to these trials and they attach themselves onto these trials emotionally, like about people they don't know, I don't get that, man. But, Alex Alex Murdoch and I had a mutual friend named Doug, who, incidentally enough, It's his 30th birthday, or 30th anniversary, wedding anniversary this weekend, right? So I just talked to Doug before we came on the show, and he's like, man, things were going great for my anniversary. But Kathy's been nagging me. His wife's been nagging him. His 30th anniversary, his wife's been nagging him to see the safe, right? And he goes, I figured it's our 30th anniversary, man. I'll show her the safe, right? So I said, okay. I said, Doug, well, that's fine. He goes, yeah. He goes, I opened the safe and she saw it. There's 40 grand and there's 3 eggs. And of course, Kathy asked me, she said, what's with the 3 eggs? And I said, Doug, what do you have 3 eggs in your safe? What's that all about, dude? And he goes, yeah, I told Kathy, he says, every time in our 30-year marriage that I bedded down with another woman, I asked her for an egg so that I could have a sort of, not remembrance, just knowledge of my infidelity, right? So, and I said, well, what did Kathy say, man? And she goes, yeah, you know what, Doug? It's our 30th anniversary. What the hell? 3 eggs, that's not that bad. 3 times. And he goes, and so he told Kat, he says, so I told Kathy, so I told her, yeah, but that's not all of it. Every time I got to a dozen eggs, I went to the market and sold them. And that's where the 40 G's came from.
King of Connecticut, you sitting there, you sitting there, talking about eggs, talking about all this stuff. Was this the old school shooters podcast or what? This, that, and the other thing?
It is.
Right? You're the heel old school shooters, I swear. The lot of you.
Without further ado, I want to do a proper introduction for our guest, Mr. Curran JACOBS. He is a catch wrestling world champion, a Michigan State Spartans champion, and a master thespian. So I will throw to you, King, to begin the discussion.
Well, I'll tell you, he is all of the above. He is all of the above, and he is also. And the reason why I really wanted to get Curran on this morning, man, he is a phenomenal filmmaker. And I know, Jack, I know you have some questions for Curran, but I want to kind of start things off because I had the opportunity last weekend to watch Curran's documentary, and it was phenomenal. For the love of catch. And there were some familiar faces, Jack, that we've had here on Old School Shooters that appeared in the documentary. Dan Severn, who's a great buddy of mine, about to come back down here to Florida to do some seminars with me. And Eric Paulson, who I did my Rough and Tumble book with. Talked to Eric daily, man, great guy. And as well as Jake Shannon, who's been here on the Hannibal TV, did a lengthy sit-down interview with the Hannibal, but also the legendary Dan Gable, the Brands brothers, Randy the Natural Couture, Josh Barnett. I mean, this documentary was fantastic. And Curran, I want to talk to you about the documentary, but also want to publicly thank you because in all seriousness, one of my best friends in the world was Billy Wicks, who we affectionately call Pops, on and off the mat. He was like a second father to me in the sense that he was one of the only guys I talked to about things in my personal life, like with my daughter, who's an adult now, but some of the tumultuous times I had, with her mother, like back in the day when she was growing up. And I was regularly at his house in North Carolina, myself, and also with Kamal Shalarus, one of my best friends, the Prince of Persia, who became really close with Pops as well. Pops was a master on the mat be it from wrestling from standing up to ground and submissions, but he was also a great man, and really really touched by the segment on him on your documentary on For the Love of Catch, brother. So just want to give you the floor. Just talk a little bit about the documentary.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate that. You know, a lot of love was poured into this thing, and having John Strickland, who was, you know, the protege of Pops, the guy that he entrusted to carry on his teachings. You know, he called me up and he's like, "You made me cry." He's like, I cried watching that, you know, and that meant a lot because, like you said, you know, most people aren't aware of Pops. And what a legend! What an influential human to just disappear with no history, or, you know, at least it not shared with everybody. And that was that's what started this whole thing. I mean, you remember after the 2018 World Championships, you know, I tried, you know, going full heel. Like, I tried creating controversy, going after.
We ought to let the fans know about that, because you and I got in the middle of your feud. Remember with old Josh Barnett there, and that was you know. And I wish Josh nothing but the best, man. I'm too old for feuds. I don't really believe in those things. But Josh ties into this story because in 2007, I was in California, 2007 and 2008, because my national sales manager for the breweries I worked with was based out of the OC. And I'd be out there training with Eric Paulson, and Josh was at that gym at the time. And Eric and I became fast friends on and off the mat too, like Pops. And there was a barbecue place we'd go to, man, and Eric would be throwing them back, and we'd be throwing them back together. We'd be doing shots, and they had great barbecue food. And I started talking to him about Pops, and that's what really started our book, the Rough and Tumble book, that we've had Eric on here on Old School Shooters to talk about. I went back to Eric's gym, CSW. I hadn't been there in years, man. I hadn't been there since like 2009. And I went back there to do a retrospective and sit in the ring with Eric and talk about it. But that's really where that book came from. Was Eric was so fascinated by Billy Wicks and by Pops. And Eric had his own history with the catch wrestling lineage as well. So it was one of those things, man, where that book was largely to honor Pops and another guy, Frankie Kane, that Pops had introduced me to, you know, back at that time, an old catch wrestler that I became really close to and learned a lot of cool stuff from as well. And these guys, the history of wrestling, this is the history of Americana. It's a history of American wrestling. And your documentary did such a fantastic job. I mean, God, I didn't even know what catch wrestling was. And I was a wrestler. That was my sport. I was a folk style wrestler, and then got into pro wrestling and judo. But when I met Pops, I had never even heard of the term catch wrestling. We have such a rich history of American wrestling that so many American wrestlers still don't know. And you did such a fantastic job of bringing that to light, brother.
Thanks, man. You know, I took a lot from like the sideshow wrestling. You know, you look at guys like Conor McGregor, Chael Sonnen, and guys that really draw in a crowd. That's all pro wrestling. So to piggyback off of what you said, you know, your relationship with Eric and everything, I was going after, you know, some legends. And you know, at the end of the day, this film, when the opportunity was presented to me, I was like, this is an ode to everyone that's laid the foundations for catch wrestling, going all the way back, you know, from Randy to Josh to Eric to all the people that are in the film. I was like, this is you know, this is largely dedicated to you. And it was the best way that I could like figure out, like, you know, apologize for the antics that I was putting out there when I was trying to be full wrestler, brother, you know, just trying to ruffle feathers and get people to want to tune in to see a match. So it means a lot. It's been well received. Everyone that's seen it, you know, as fractured as the catch wrestling community has been over the years, it was really a unifying thing to build from the beginning, and it wouldn't have happened without everyone involved. So that means a lot, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what too, you know, years ago I had the absolute honor of being a guest on the Mat radio show, the terrestrial radio show out of Iowa. Mike Chapman, Kyle Klingman, and Mike Chapman. Man, what an awesome dude, you know.
Isn't
and he was, yeah.
His basement's a museum, brother. He's got Frank Gotch's actual sofa, his actual hat. He's got things you wouldn't believe. The man is like a tree of knowledge. Yeah, I fell in love with the guy when I had dinner with him and Randy in Malibu years ago. And that, you know, like you said, how do wrestlers like us grow up not knowing about catch wrestling or Frank Gotch or all the people that set it all up for us? You know, I mean, Jack, were you aware of catch wrestling, like the history of like the act going back? It started everything. It was as big as boxing at one point. And these guys were killers. Like these guys were killers. And if it wasn't for the AAU being like, no, we're going to keep it sport, we wouldn't have collegiate high school wrestling like we have now. Man, I'm so passionate and crazy about this. Wrestlers that have seen it, their minds are blown. Even if you aren't affiliated with the sport of wrestling, I think that there's no better introduction than this film. You know, it really captures the heart and spirit of the history, as well as the competitors that gave birth to the style.
Yeah, you know, Curran, Mike Chapman writes in the book From Gotch to Gable about Hugo Optopolek. And Eric and I, we used a lot of Mike Chapman's work and Mark Hewitt's work in writing Rough and Tumble. And Hugo Optopolek was a guy who changed the rules of scholastic wrestling. And he took out all the quote unquote dangerous stuff and sort of watered it down. And that's, you know, that's the genesis of that. And I'll tell you, man, you know, I started amateur wrestling in the 80s, and there was still a lot of dirty wrestling moves, you know, dirty wrestling holds. And you talk about, you know, leg riding moves like the guillotine and the banana split, the cross faces, neck cranks, a lot of stuff. They continue. A lot of the stuff stayed in scholastic wrestling. It was just like it was just what was called quote unquote, you know, dirty wrestling.
Yeah, man. It's like, even you look at Mark Schultz, even, and like old school wrestlers pulling double wrist locks to flip guys on their back. You know, shout out to Nick Simmons, East Lansing Spartan legend. They called him the Strangler. Dude, he would literally get guys in anacondas and then flip them and pin them.
Oh yeah.
You can't like wrestle on you now because of that.
Pinch them and wake them up. Yeah, pin them. Pinch them and wake them up.
Match is over. Yeah, man. But you know, it's you're keeping the spirit of like the old school pro wrestling alive. I mean, the robe, the glasses, the style, the way that you know go on about it. It's your character, man. You've learned from the best. They sold tickets. They drew in crowds. They made it exciting.
And Curran, you know, this kind of ties into something I want to address on this show. Is there's a gentleman up in Connecticut, of where I am still king, even though I don't reside there, who has had the audacity to challenge me.
Here we go.
His name is Spiro Papakosmos. He is a legend in wrestling in my hometown. He is the coach of my old team, the Norwalk Bears. He did help me put on the fundraiser in 2017. He put that on where I knocked the cauliflower Chase Brown out with his own cauliflower. But he now has a new heart beating in his chest because he and I want to wish him the best in that regard. As when I was up there in 2017, he was in really rough shape with congenital heart disease, and Spiro is a legendary wrestler from my state and old teammate of mine, and I wished him the best. But he got a new heart. And now that he's got a new heart, he's got the audacity to challenge me to come back this fall to my hometown and face him in the squared circle. And I just want to say this about Spiro. Yeah, he's a great wrestler, but the town I grew up in, when I grew up, if you go back 35 years ago, it was like Leave It to Beaver. 40 years ago, it was like Mayberry. We used to have our doors unlocked. We could ride our bicycles around town in Norwalk, Connecticut. We weren't worried about human trafficking. It's Spiro. You slumlord. You were the cause of the degradation of my hometown. And when I come back to Norwalk, Connecticut, as I did in 2017, to stretch that punk Chase Brown like a rubber band. When I come back, I'm going to remind the fine people of Norwalk of how it was in the golden years.
Wow. You know what? That was pretty damn good. Next time I'd be like, get up right up into that camera though, so we can like see how serious you are in that eye of death.
Take off the glasses.
Yeah, take him off next time. Get right up in there and be like, I'm coming for you, boy. Oh, no. That could also be misinterpreted. I don't know. What do you think? What else could we do? Get right up there. I don't know. That was good, man.
Thank you, brother. So I want to bring the gentleman in because he is a true gentleman. Jack Kilby, the man himself, the CEO of Great North Wrestling. Jack, I want to turn it over to you to talk to our guest, the great master thespian, the catch wrestling world champion, the Michigan State Spartans team captain, and the great filmmaker, Mr. Curran JACOBS.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, Curran, how did you get involved in the acting world, and what would be your, aside from the tremendous film we've discussed, what would be your most proud accomplishments, either in terms of film or stage?
Film recently would have to be Silent Night in Algona. That's making its way across the Midwest right now. It's based on a true story about a prisoner of war camp, Germans, right in Algona, Iowa. And it was pretty controversial because the character I play had the idea to use these Germans to help with the shortage of hands on farms. And it freaked people out, but it actually ended up working. And a lot of those Germans after the war ended up staying there and having families. So I play Rudy Teets. He was a real guy, real history there. That's my proudest film moment. And stage would have to be Stanley Kowalski. Marlon Brando famously portrayed him and really changed film, because up until Brando, it was very theatrical. It was like, oh, I have not seen you there, darling. And then like he zoned it in and made it like real, thanks to his teachings. But stage was my first love. And I got my master's in theater at Michigan State, 2018. It was three crazy, crazy hard years, man. You have to really learn how to be vulnerable and open and fearless and not give a crap if there's a camera rolling or if you got a crowd of 300 people. They're both different animals, but I love it, man. I've always been an artist / combatant. So making that
You know,
film. Oh, go ahead, brother.
Curran, I actually pop my cherry in that regard. Myself, I've always wanted to be a stage actor and try my hand at that because I love performing. I performed stand-up comedy last night in Sanford, Florida, and I played the Christmas tree salesman, the rather rambunctious Christmas tree salesman in the Christmas Story play in Aiken, South Carolina, for 2 years in a row, just before Corona came along, and I am talking with the Flagler County Playhouse about playing a gangster. They want me to play a gangster in an upcoming play there.
I would cast you as a gangster. There's no doubt about it. King of Connecticut. You already got the name too.
Carlo Gambino.
Yeah, so
it's perfect.
I gotta tell you, man, I've been getting Jack here to come out of his shell as a performer, and I'm gonna kind of put him on the spot here. And we're all about old school, Jack. Will you perform a little bit from the chairman of the board, Mr. Frank Sinatra, tribute here for Mr. Curran JACOBS?
Well, that's usually an extra booking fee, but I'll do a few bars just because you asked so nicely. Okay.
Pick a song.
Okay. Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. That's it. That's all you get.
Yeah, all right, my man. I thought you were about to just bust out. I thought there was about to be a saxophone in the back. That's amazing.
Well, actually, my signature live and a cappella is great, but my signature song, which doesn't maybe fits the rubric here, is Freebird, but that usually involves quite a few beers and a dingy food.
Cheers.
But
yes, hell of a night. Yeah,
hell of a
theater, like live singing theater. I love the feel of the crowd, and for the King there, it's you're able to play off of them, the energy, and be loud and obnoxious. Whereas that camera, when you get that camera going, it captures everything. And I learned that my stage was too big on the lens. So when that camera's rolling, it's like that's the biggest thing. You can be more physical on stage, more loud, because you got to have Graham on the very back row hear you. But film, you have to very focus on the lens and nothing else, and not care about what is going on around you. You got lighting around you, director, makeup person. So
Curran, there's two. I'll tell you, Curran, I have a question for you to interject a little bit. As you say that, it makes me think there's two aspects of performance art that I think you would do great at, two aspects that are hobbies of mine that I love to do. One is stand-up comedy, and two is professional wrestling.
And both, I've pondered both of them. Pro wrestling, I got to tell you, I had an audition in LA for a wrestling gig. My agent was like, it's a wrestling gig. You can do it. It was pro wrestling. I show up with a singlet and my wrestling shoes. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm not a pro wrestler. There's this 6'8" dude, and we had to choreograph this, and he had to grab me and pick me up in the air and slam me on my back. And this is why it was so important for me to put this segment in For the Love of Catch, because I ain't kidding you. The next day I couldn't walk. I was like, pro wrestlers are crazy. They put their bodies through so much pain. And he was, it's so dangerous. This dude could have killed me. He could have collapsed a lung, knocked my jaw off my face. He was such a professional. He knew when to pull his punches. But that scared the crap out of me. I was like, my respect for pro wrestlers went through the roof. I know it's not real competition. It's a show, but it's a dangerous show, man. That's dangerous. So that is why that kind of made me veer away from that. Cause I was like, competitively, I'll try pro MMA, over pro wrestling. I could pull around a Rousey, if I ever made it to that level. But Yeah, man, and stand-up comedy, I think, yeah, I've thought about that too. That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, different animal, but again, nothing like a live performance in front of a crowd.
I want to perform for you guys because I've been doing this set that kind of blends new and old a little. And I'll do for you guys a set. I won't do the whole set I did last night, but I'll do just a little sample. And I start out by saying, "Are there any boxing fans in the crowd? And any Mike Tyson fans?" And you'll get, yeah, we like Mike. I said, a lot of you may not know, Mike and I are tight, man. We're bros. And he has been stepping outside his comfort zone in many regards. And he's been in the news lately, been in a little heat, but he wanted to get into singing. And I wrote his first song for him. And I'm going to perform it for you people as Mike Tyson. My name is Mike Tyson, not Henry Ford. I like the coochie and I love the Lord. All my suits are custom made, tattoo on my face, and I still get laid. And I gotta say, Mike's been in the news lately, but so has Pamela Anderson. So is Pamela Anderson. She's had this feud with the tool man, Tim Taylor. And you might ask yourself, what does Pamela Anderson have to do with Mike Tyson? Well, she can't wrestle, but you should see her box. It looks like Arby's roast beef sandwich. And I could keep going on the Pam Anderson stuff because I get into the whole thing with Tim Allen, but just a little sample, keep it in the spirit of entertainment this morning. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Kilby.
I was just going to say, and on that note, could you, Curran, briefly walk us through your what is noted as an epic tournament victory in 2018 when you won the Catch Wrestling World Championship?
Yeah, man, there was a lot of heat heading into that tournament again because I had no shame in posting, videos of just creating memes, posting videos. So there was a lot of hard feelings heading into that tournament. And I knew it was going to be tough. And I went against 3 guys that night. And it was probably one of the craziest, by far the craziest fight of my life competitively. I wrestled for a total of 1 hour and 34 minutes against these guys. And, one after the other. And it was nuts. The shower later sucked because I literally had like 3rd-degree burns on my face from all the foreheads just gouging into my face and cross faces throughout the whole night. But yeah, man, that was the best night of my life competitively. Mentally, I was on point. And it's kind of fizzled out afterwards. There's various catch wrestling organizations still trying to keep it alive. I went up a guy down in Florida and he beat me, popped a rib. That's kind of fizzled out. So, I really was hoping that the documentary would unite all of us again to hold like the world championship again and to keep that going. But the tough thing is it's hard to get people to compete in that style when you have jiu-jitsu. Catch wrestling is another, it's it's a lot more exhausting. It's because you risk being pinned. And a lot of these guys, it's where they live in jiu-jitsu is off their back, pulling guard and whatnot. But yeah, man, I'm hoping to, compete again for a legit title. Because that night, everyone came together for one epic night. And people are still talking about those matches, man. It showed real pro wrestling the way it was before the stunts and the choreography and the characters.
Curran, take us through, for those that didn't see it, if you could briefly take us through the matches and who you faced and what were the biggest challenges and obstacles in that epic tournament win?
Yeah, my first match was friggin' tough, man. It was against Johnny Buck. He's another disciple of Pop's. He runs his gym down in the South. Very strong wrestling base, strong wrestler.
Former Citadel, former D1 Citadel wrestler.
Yep.
Yeah, I know Johnny.
Yep, Johnny Buck. Yep. And he had a brilliant strategy, which was to try to wear me down and use his forehead pressure as a weapon. It's legal. And it's one of those catch wrestling details, how dangerous the forehead can be when you're grinding in the clinch against the ropes. And he was playing very a defensive game. And we went 32 minutes before I finally wore him down. And
was it a 2 out of 3 match? 2 out of 3 falls match?
Yeah. So here is why I wrestled for an hour and 34 minutes. Was each round was 5 minutes. It was best 2 out of 3 falls for the first 3 rounds. If there was no fall in the first 3 rounds, you'd go into an overtime round of 5 minutes. And it just kept going until there was a winner. Like, no points. It was your will against the other man's will. Yeah. And my second match was against Eric Hammer, who's still to this day the strongest man that's ever grabbed a hold of me. I thought he was going to kill me. Like, that guy was on another level. He threw me around like a rag doll. But again, I was talking so much trash against, his coach, Josh, and he had a lot of hard feelings. So I think that didn't help because he kind of wore down after 2 rounds. And then the third match was against Brandon Ruiz, and he's a very well respected grappler, multi-time world champion.
Just to put that in perspective, because I don't know Brandon Ruiz at all, but I did train in South Carolina with Kellyanne Dunson, because I was good buddies with Jason Ballack, the coach at Newberry College, and Kelly was a Newberry wrestler. And I'm telling you, it was me, Steve Volponi, who was a 2-time state champion in South Carolina, Mike Ellis, who was a state champion in South Carolina, both wrestlers from Anderson, all 3 of us going at Kelly when he was going for the FILA Worlds, and none of the 3 of us could really do a damn thing with him. And Brandon Ruiz beat Kelly in FILA Worlds in the finals. So that just shows you the level of competitors you were going up against. And people really need to understand that, because one thing that you and I talked about on my old podcast was back in the day, the catch wrestling competitions didn't really have the stiffest competitors. And I had won a catch belt way back in the day in Mississippi, and they were lower level guys. Now at this competition in 2018, these were elite level grapplers. And I think people that don't follow, because most people probably that follow our show, Old School Shooters, don't know the genesis of catch wrestling. These were some world-class competitors that you were going against. Brandon Ruiz is a world champion, a world grappling champion in FILA. He beat Kelly, and that tells me all I need to know about how good he is, having not met him when I saw him beat Kelly, because Kelly is an absolute stud, and you beat him. You beat Brandon. So I mean, it was an amazing feat, and you beat Brandon in the final round after such a lengthy time of grueling competition.
Yeah, man. It was shortly after my mom's passing. I literally trained like Rocky. Like, I wanted nothing more than to win that night. And I've had a lot of matches, a lot of experiences at Michigan State University where I beat myself before I stepped in the mat. And you know what I'm talking about as a wrestler. You can go out there and already lose mentally just with the slightest self-doubt. I was one match away from being an All-American. I was one match away from being a state champion. And both of those matches, I choked in a very big way mentally. And a lot of people who have competed, you know what I'm talking about. You know when that inner voice can turn on you and your legs all of a sudden feel like they're just filled with concrete. You can't breathe very well. And I went into that tournament in 2018, man, it's just so calm. Like I know it sounds cryptic, but it was almost like I was prepared to die. Like I didn't care. Like the guy that was cornering me that night, he goes, "What's the plan?" And I said, "I don't have one. They're just going to have to kill me if they want to beat me." And that's how I wrestled. And, yeah, man.
It was amazing. Yeah. And you became a world champion, defeating a world champion in the finals. And for people that aren't familiar with wrestling, FILA is the world championships for Greco for freestyle and also for grappling. And I believe, and I haven't followed it lately, but I think that FILA just continued grappling world championships. But Brandon Ruiz, along with Kelly, were grappling world champions. And when Kelly used to fight in South Carolina, they always used to bill him as a world champion because he was a FILA, he was a FILA world grappling champion. And you beat the guy that beat him in the finals. And Buck is Buck doesn't like me much personally, but Buck is a stud too, man. I've been on the mat with him years ago in North Carolina. He's a stud too, out of the Citadel. So you beat some real studs in this tournament, so to become world champion. Now, what's the future? And I don't even know this because I don't follow catch wrestling that closely. What was the future of that world title? So you won the world title in 2018. Did they continue to have more tournaments?
Josh Barnett is running tournaments. Jake Shannon is running shows. They were running. Josh LeDuc ran a few, and since stopped. It's just, I don't think it's going to be able to work until we're all together like we were in 2018. Since 2018, those organizations again went their own way. I just think there's a lot of egos in the room. There's a lot of philosophies in the room. And I think that if we can all come together with, honestly, I was almost thinking that we could do like a Cobra Kai thing. Like each tribe, catch tribe, I like to call them, should enter like an 8-man or a 16-man bracket and go at it, and with the same rules, because I think those rules are incredible because it really tests your mental fortitude as well as your physical training.
Sure. Jake is doing something. Jake Shannon's been here on the Hannibal TV, and also I believe on the other podcast that Jack Kilby does, and he's doing something rather interesting with pro wrestling, and I'm helping him in that regard with Jack and some of these pro wrestling promotions where it's 4-man tournaments, but he's not billing as catch wrestling. He's calling it shoot pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. But it's essentially the same in that regard, and it's a good business model. I'm happy to help him because I think that it will help to elevate the IQ of the historical IQ and the IQ of pro wrestling fans, and give some variety on the shows. But with respect to a world championship like you guys had in 2018 with the elite, with the best of the best, it would be really cool to do another one of those.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be wonderful. And I don't think it wouldn't be able to happen, though, without the support of Barnett, with Shannon, with all these guys. I would like LeDuc on board. I would like that. There's a Texas organization that runs catch wrestling. I would like that guy on board because.
What about that crazy guy? What about that crazy? I didn't want to interrupt you, but there's a story. I don't know if you want to tell it. Some crazy guy that was out there.
Oh no, absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We won't talk about There's some kind of
No.
lunatic that was involved in the documentary. He's kind of an insane guy, but we won't talk about that.
We won't. Yeah, it was a rough start to the documentary for sure. But no, man, I think that if we can all come aboard and, you know, market and advertise it, I think we could do it. It's just tough. It's tough. I mean, yeah, man, we just need to figure it out, come together and have a conversation, have a dialogue. I would love to compete again. I would love to I would love redemption against Quentin, you know, the guy that did a great job down in Florida. He dispatched me. I would love him to be in the tournament. I would love the guy that just beat him, John Combs, to be in the tournament. Yeah, I think that there's a way. We just need have to have the will.
Definitely, man. Definitely. I kind of want to turn back to this documentary. It's a fantastic documentary, For the Love of Catch, because I did a review here on Hannibal TV about another wrestling movie that I saw last weekend called Hadley's Rebellion from 1983, man. It was 2 years pre-Vision Quest. And so I talked about Spiro earlier, and I called Spiro and I told him, I said, we had a tradition at Norwalk Wrestling where the start of each season, the coach has a people over, and it goes way back to my days, and everybody watches Vision Quest. And I said, bro, I found a movie better than Vision Quest. It's called Hadley's Rebellion. Great wrestling movie. Great movie just in general, not just wrestling movie. And Curran's documentary, For the Love of Catch, was a fantastic documentary. And one guy that's been a recurring guest, good friend of mine personally, goes way back to Austin, Texas, when I used to train at his gym with Kamal Shalarus, his affiliate gym, CTC, is Pat Miletich. And you want to talk about a guy who knows catch wrestling history, man. Oh, if you ever get a chance to reach out to Pat, man, his uncle was a barnstormer in the carnivals, his great uncle. And he talked to me and Jack about it. He talked to my old show about it. He's an Iowa boy and an Iowa wrestler. And
he's
man,
a legend, man. He created
UFC legend. Absolutely. And man, you talk about a guy with a love and a passion for old school catch wrestling. He's one of the guys that nobody's really talking to. And your documentary, let's look at it. You have the absolute legend, Dan Gable. You have the Brands brothers. You've got the greatest wrestling historian and author, Mike Chapman. You've got our friends, Stan the Beast Severn, Eric Paulson, Jake Shannon, Kenny Lester, who's a character, man. Kenny used to come and party with me and stay at my house when he was doing pro wrestling and bring his sexy ring girls over to the casa, man. We had a blast. Kenny's old school, man. We got to get Kenny on the platform there, Jack. But all these great guys you have, the one guy that I'll say that was missing was Pat, because Pat is just so knowledgeable about catch wrestling and wrestling history.
If I had his information, I would have 100% included him. I'm a huge Pat Miletich fan. He's one of the OGs, man. He's one of the the guys that helped launch the UFC. I was a huge fan of his disciple, Matt Hughes. You know, it's he's a legend for real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say he was one of my favorite recurring guests on the old King's Court, which Curran had an opportunity to co-host with me, which was a blast. We co-hosted with King Mo. You came in, co-hosted with me the old King Mo episode, and you co-hosted with me when we did the retrospective on the Rough and Tumble book. And then we did an episode where we absolutely just bashed someone that we're not going to mention what that was about. But man, it was great. But Pat, man, was just to sit and talk to that dude. I mean, pick his brain. The guy is he's genius level, man.
Yeah. I might
You know?
might get your information because there's going to be a follow-up. We're on the works right now, working on getting a second documentary up and running. Super stoked about this one. It's gonna be pretty badass.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So Jack, I'm going to turn it back over to you for any remaining questions you have for our guest.
Well, before we wrap it up, the question that we pose all of the guests that graciously give their time to come on the Old School Shooters podcast is the concept of old school, and what does that mean to you personally, and from the perspective of a mindset in general that we may not, well, no question, we don't see today.
You know, I'm a school teacher, and I'm seeing an extreme lack in discipline. Old school to me is that all-American work ethic that seems to dissipate with the TikTok generation, the obsession with technology. It's scary, man, because old school to me has never been needed more. We're walking on pins and needles as a nation right now, always afraid of what to say, who you're going to offend, which pronoun to use. I mean, I could go on. Old school to me is what the United States needs to bring back if we're going to survive, because there's a lot of pampered, undisciplined, spoiled individuals out there that are taking for granted what occurred in 1776. And if we're not careful, you know, we could be in a lot of trouble. That's what old school means to me, my friend. It's yeah, we need to bring old school back.
Excellent. King, your closing thoughts today, sir.
Very, very well said, Curran. I agree. I concur. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And always like to lighten up the mood at the end of the show with song. And there's a verse from a song by the chairman of the board, Mr. Frank Sinatra, that sort of typifies what this show is all about. And I'm going to sing it for you before I hit our tagline and close out. So I want the listeners to just absorb and listen to these lyrics. I've been to town, beyond the boulevard and down the beach, and I've learned things that only time can teach. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Old School Shooters, Silver Sages, spreading knowledge to the younger ages. Until next time, everybody, have a great weekend.
Take care.